Okay, so we finished chapter 2. So now we are starting chapter 3. Okay, chapter 3 is about job order cost accounting. Job order cost accounting. So here are the learning objectives. So we want to understand what are the purpose characteristics of cost accounting. Okay, and we also be able to describe the flow of the cost in a job order costing accounting system. So this chapter, we are focusing on job order accounting system. And number 3, we want to know what a job cost sheet is like, okay, and how that sheet is used. Number 4, in terms of overhead, manufacturing overhead, how can we, what is the amount we're gonna assign to the working in process inventory, right? How do we calculate that amount of the manufacturing overhead? So then we're going to learn about the predetermined predetermined overhead rate. Okay. Number 5, you want to know for sure. You want to know how to do the accounting entries, right? Number 6, what happened if you either under or over applied the manufacturing overhead? Okay, so what's the purpose of cost accounting system? You can see that the 3 main aspects is to measure, to record, and to report the product cost. Why this is important? Okay, why this is important? Because in order for us to capture the accurate product cost information, okay, we're going to have important, useful, reliable accounting information system. Okay, so basically, you need to have a general ledger to capture all the information, right? How much materials is used, right? What is the amount of the labor hours, right? So you need to have a really, really good general ledger to capture all this information. And we are talking about the product cost, right? Product cost is captured on the inventory, right? Before these items are sold, right? So the perpetual inventory system is also relevant in order to make sure that we are collecting accurate information about the product cost. 2 basic types of cost accounting system: job order cost system versus process cost system. Okay, so we are focusing in this chapter, the job order cost system. So what is this system? Okay, Okay, so basically what happened is if we focus on each unit or each bunch of units, okay, so in those cases that we are going to create the job orders, okay, so basically the whole point under this job order cost system is to capture the cost by job, okay? For each job, you capture this cost, okay? That's the job order cost system. So basically, for each unit or each bunch of the units, right, you are manufacturing, okay, you accumulate all the cost, okay? So for what kind of things, right? So for example, did I write this word wrong? For the car repair, right? So you can take a look at these 2 cars, right? Okay, this one is in a car collision, flat tire, and very kind of broken back right here. And this one is only like a flat tire, right? Okay, so for the repair, for the workshop, for the body shop, okay, so they will do this job by job, right? So basically they will create the job order for this car, and they will create the job order for this car, and they will keep track of how many labor hours they spend on this car, right? What kind of materials they have to replace to fix it, right? So you definitely have to do quite a bit of work to fix the exterior, right? But for this one, you are only dealing with the tire, right? So you can see that the different jobs right? In terms of nature of the work is different. They probably need different types of materials. They need a different amount of time, the labor time, right? So in that case, right, they will not mix them up, right? They won't mix them up. They will create a job order for each individual case, okay? And then they will accumulate cost for that specific job, okay? Same thing for like a professional service companies, right? So for accounting firm, right? You know, you have easy tax returns, right? Okay, this CPA, he can do this job by taxing by taxing his friends. Okay, that's how easy it is, right? But then here it's too difficult. She doesn't even want to do it. Okay, so you have to consider that the nature of the work. So these two tax returns, they are totally different, right? They are so unique, so different. So therefore, you have to accumulate cost based on that job order, right? So you keep track of time you spend on this easy tax return, right? Okay, so you see why we have a job order cost system, because in nature, some of the business, right? Each individual job, okay, is very unique, very different from the other. So they have to make sure they will keep track of the cost for each job. Okay, that's the job order cost system. So basically, at the end of a given accounting period, okay, so the product cost will be either in the working in process inventory. So those are the jobs are not completed, right? So suppose at the end of the year end, I'm in the middle of working on a tax return, right? So my charge out time is charge out rate is $200 per hour. I have spent 5 hours there. So 5 times 200, that's $1,000. So basically at the year end, this tax return is not completed. So this is my working in process inventory. And what's the amount? 200 times 5, right? So $1,000 there. For finished goods inventory, so those are the jobs completed and not yet sold, right? Finished goods inventory. Those are the jobs completed but not yet sold. So there are product costs accumulated there as well, right? So the textbook give us this example. Okay, basically this is a printing company. So we contrast the two different jobs, right? One is for the wedding inventory, the other one is for menu. So as you can see that these are in nature quite different, right? So basically the amount, first of all, the amount for this product, you need a 225 envelopes, right? This is the 225 invitation. For this one, you only need 50 copies, okay? So in terms of the quantity, it's different. And also this one, maybe it has to be a higher quality laminations, right? You need laminations to protect the menu. And this one, right, this is just a regular wedding imitations, so they don't have the fancy laminations. And also they use black ink here, and they use colored ink, right? So you can see that in nature, these two jobs are quite different. So therefore, it makes sense to treat each job individually, okay? So each job, for the job order cost system, this is a key word. Each job has distinguishing characteristics and related cost, okay? How are we doing so far? Does anyone have a question? No? Okay. So for process cost system, right? So that's the, remember, there are two basic cost system, right? Job order and the process. So for process cost system, this one will be like, this system will be used when a large volume of similar products are manufactured, okay? So the products are very similar to each other, okay? So you don't have to make that distinguishment, right? Between the different jobs. So basically you want accumulated the total cost, and then you just divide it by the units, right? So then you figured out what's the cost of the average. So example, cereals, right? So the company may only produce one type of cereals, right? So, you don't have to think about, I'm going to capture this bag of the cereals, right? Versus that bag. They are essentially the same, right? And the same idea for this, picture shows the assembly line of the automobile, right? So you can see that, this is a assembly line. All the cars are the same structure, probably the same paint, right? The same model, right? So this would be the process cost. You accumulate all the cost, right? And then you just worked on average, right? You figured out what's by unit. So you can see that for the potato chip, right? So you harvest potato, eventually you want to, manufacture the chips, right? In the bags, right? But for the company, all the chips are the similar, right? Maybe for each bag, they're the same size, right? Same weight, even the same ingredients, right? They're all the same chips, right? So then this will be the process. You clean the potatoes and then you slice them, you fry them, and then you, bagging them. So in this case, these items, this output, the products are very similar, right? And it's large volume. So in this case, basically you just accumulated the cost over a specific time, and then you divide it by the amount of the production, right? That will be the average cost. Okay. Do you see the difference between job order system versus the process cost system? Okay, do you understand? If you understand, please give me a sum up. So far, everything. Okay, that's pretty good. So if you have any question, make sure you let me know, okay? Okay, oops. Sorry. Okay, did you see the answer?
It's C.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, sorry for that. So which of the following would most likely use job costing? Okay, so an oil refinery, a paper company, a bottled water company. So these three business, right? They all created large volume of similar products, right? A custom home builder, this will be different, right? Because the design is different. It's customized homes, right? Some homes have 4 bedroom, others have 5, right? Maybe I prefer my house have a swimming pool inside, right? So it's customized home, right? So by nature, they have different characteristics, right? So you have to treat each job individually, right? Because they're gonna demand on different materials. They're gonna takes different amount of time of the labor, right? To complete these jobs. Does that make sense for this one?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it be the oil refinery?
Oil refinery. So my understanding in this question is about, you have some crude oil, and that's your input, and your output is a refined oil. Okay, I'm not in the oil industry, but that's my basic understanding is there's a process. You are refining the raw materials, that's the crude oil, into a much better refined oil. So that's how I interpreted it. Yeah. So do you know much more about that business, James?
Yeah, I do actually.
Can you maybe share with us about what your observation?
Well, like every oil refinery is like, it depends, right? There's a lot of different, sure, like your input is your crude oil and your output is whatever your finished products are. But there's a lot of different customizations in between. Like there's a lot of different, depending on the type of crude that you're extracting or whatever plant it takes. Like there's so many different options, so many different ways to build an oil refinery. And that's why, to me, I think this is kind of a poor example, because there's so many customizations in an oil refinery that this is kind of, but I guess for the purpose of this class, it's fine.
So yeah,
I think as well, it would be coming from different customers. So like your input from one customer would be for one job, and typically another customer would input a different type of
exactly.
crude, right? So it could be under another job as well. So I agree with James, I think.
Yeah, you think about the example I gave you, the car manufacturer, right? There are different models, right? You have caravan, you also have, trucks, right? So basically you have to keep track of the cost for each individual model, right? If you are talking from that perspective, then it's going to be a job order system, right? But if you are only talking about this production line for Dodge Caravan, right? It is a process cost system, right? So the idea is for one type of crude oil, right? You're gonna refine it into a different one type of the refined oil. In this process, it is a process cost system. But if you're talking about a different type of crude oil, then I agree with you that two processes should be treated differently. Okay. So you see what I'm saying? So when you are talking about different cars, then it's a job order costing, right? You have to keep cost separately, right? You have a Ford, I'm not a big fan of cars, so I don't know all this brand, but you have different manufacturers, right? You have different models. You have to keep track of the cost separately from different models, right? Because like I said, you use different amount of raw materials, right? The amount of the labor work will be different, right? Even for the machine, for the automation, right? The machineries, they have the different models to set up, right? To build a frame. So it's totally different, processing systems. So for different type of cars. So in that case, for the different model of the car, you have to keep track of their cost, right? But if you're only talking about, let's say, this type of oil, right? So then it is a process cost. And even back to the chips example, right? There are different flavors of chips, right? So there are different size, maybe, different, one company, they may have different production line, right? So maybe they have different product, right? So you have to keep a separate tracking of the system of each production line, right? So, but for one processing production line, you're gonna use that process cost system. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I read it as just a
Thank you.
general question.
Okay.
Like when an oil refinery, I just think oil, like, and most people don't know about the different types of crude oil. So when you read into it, yeah, you can see the different types, but when it just says an oil refinery, it's one single product of oil, same oil type thing, right? Whereas if it said custom oil refinery, then I think that's your keyword is custom. Same thing with the home builder. That's the keyword.
Yeah, customized. Yeah, customized for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
I get that for the purpose of this class. I don't know. I just wanted to bring up some discussion.
No, that's good. That's very good, James. Yeah, but I hope that I explained well in terms of the differentiations, right? Even within the same companies, right? They probably have to keep track of different production line because they have different end products, right? But within one type of product, they will have the process cost system, right? Yeah. Okay, good. So next one, the flow of the manufacturing cost mirrors the physical flow of inputs as they were converted into finished goods. So this is what we're talking about, right? So physical flows, right? Think about that. The physical flows would be, you have a raw materials warehouse. Okay, you're gonna transfer that raw materials, okay? Physical flow, right? From the raw materials warehouse to your workshop. That's where the work in process inventory happens, right? And once you are done, you have some finished product. You are going to move those finished product into your finished goods inventory warehouse, right? Because they're ready for sale, right? So the physical flow, okay, you see the physical flow mirrors the cost flow. So what do we mean by that? Is that all this cost, right? Your materials, labor, and overhead, they are flowing into your working in process inventory, okay? And then once this product is completed, the cost will keep flowing into your finished goods inventory. And then when you sold these items, that cost will flow to the income statement, right? That's the cost of goods sold. So the cost will finally reach the income statement. Before this point, it's always stay on the balance sheet as part of the inventory, okay? So you see the cost flowing, okay? Cost flowing from across the different inventories eventually ended up in the income statement, right? So that's also mirrors of the physical flow of the product, right? So initially it's raw materials, and then it's completed job, right? And then you sold it, okay? Okay, so there are two major steps in the flows of the cost, okay? First, you want to accumulate all manufacturing costs as incurred, raw materials, labor, manufacturing overhead, okay? So you accumulate this cost, you see the T accounts, right? So you just accumulate this cost by debiting to the T account, right? And then the second step would be assign cost to each specific job or unit, okay? So for each specific job, how much materials you have used for that job, how many labor time you have incurred for that specific job, and what is the amount of the manufacturing overhead should be assigned to that specific job offer. The job unit. Okay, so basically you can see that's the T account for these two inventories, raw materials and work in process inventory. So raw materials could be including direct materials and indirect materials, right? Some companies may keep two separate accounts. One raw materials inventory is for direct, the other for indirect, right? So regardless, when you purchase materials, do you debit this raw materials inventory or credit?
Debit.
Debit. Yeah, so when you purchase the materials, you debit it. How about when you use it? When you use the materials, do you debit or credit?
You credit the work in progress.
Yes, so you credit your raw materials, right? You use the materials. Okay, so now where these materials go, right? The physical flow, where does this raw materials go?
Work in progress inventory.
Yeah, working
process, yeah.
Working in process, right? Inventory. So in this case, do you debit working in progress or credit working in progress?
Debit.
Debit.
Right? Okay, very good. So you see the cost flow, right? The direct materials cost flow from the raw materials inventory to the working in process inventory, right? And that's also a physical flow. That's where the raw materials flow from the materials warehouse to the factory, right? To the factory. So here's one example. January 8, ABC Manufacturing purchased 1,000 handles on account at $4 per unit and 500 modules at $10 per unit. So the total cost will be 4,000 plus 5,000, 9,000, right? What's my journal entry? So this is back to 2,100, okay?
Do you debit raw material and then we're gonna credit account payable because it's on account?
Very good, very good. So you debit raw materials inventory 9,000, credit accounts payable because this purchase is on account, right? And so then you have a description to record the purchase of raw materials on account. Okay. So for the manufacturing cost, the factory labor, the labor cost, again, I have this T account. Okay. The cost are accumulated. So if there's a labor cost incurred, I debit it. Okay. Once I assign this cost to a job offer into the working in progress, I credit it. The idea is the balance has to be zero at the ending of accounting period. Okay. This is a clearing account. In 2100, remember we learned about temporary account or permanent account, right? Okay, do you guys remember what's temporary account and versus permanent account?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Isn't the permanent account the one that you're constantly have money coming in and out of, and then the other one is one that you have to at the end of the year zero out?
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, very good.
Could I take a stab at it, Professor?
Yeah.
Like, I think that the income statement is a temporary account and the balance sheet is a permanent account. Is that correct?
Yeah. So like revenues, expenses, these are temporarily. So at the end of each accounting period, you have to set it to be zero, right? Remember, you have a closing journal entry, right?
Yes.
Close out the revenue expenses into return earnings, right?
Okay.
So hopefully you still remember all these. So we call it a temporary account, right? Like a cash inventory, right? You have a balance at the end of the accounting period, right? You don't close it to zero, right? If there is like $1 million sitting on your bank account, right? You can't say, I'm gonna close it. What are you gonna do? You're gonna spend all the money before the end of the year? So that money will stay there, right? That's a permanent account. Those are balance sheet account, right? But for, so in this case, I think a clearing account is another word for temporary account, maybe different. They are using different terminologies, right? So the idea is at the end of the accounting period, you have to set this balance to be zero, okay? So the factory labor account, this is one labor cost incurred, you accumulate them by debiting them. Once you assign this cost into the working in process inventory, you are going to credit them, okay? And at the end of the accounting period, this balance should be zero, okay? So the labor cost would include, can anyone tell me what the labor cost would include?
Direct labor.
Yeah, direct labor.
And
Payroll
indirect
taxes.
labor.
Indirect labor, yeah, this is all good. So
Payroll
in
taxes.
terms of the what should I say? Let's say you know, direct labor. So
Okay, like assembly line workers.
yeah. So what the cost will be? What the cost will be? So I will give you one example. Okay, so that'll be the wage, gross earnings.
Oh, okay.
So on the payday, right, you
Okay.
receive wage or gross earnings. So this is the cost on the employer, right? What would be some other cost of the employer has to bear related
Fringe
to
benefits?
labor? Pardon me?
Fringe benefits.
Yeah, benefits. Yeah, I heard
Yes.
benefits. What else?
Payroll taxes. Payroll
Payroll
taxes.
Payroll
taxes.
tax. Yeah. So not only the employee will pay CPP-EI, right? The employer also have to pay Canadian pension plan and employment insurance, right? So the employer has paid a portion of the CPP and the EI. That's the cost, right? And also some benefits, right? Maybe dental benefits, maybe healthcare benefits, right? Drugs, prescriptions, those medical plan, health plan, right? So this is all the cost of the labor cost, right? So now let's talk about yeah, Patricia.
Vacation is as well cost.
Pardon me?
Okay. Vacations.
Vacations.
Yeah.
Vacations probably is billed here. They for example, if you are a part-time employee, they will give you 4% more money. That's considered as your vacation time. So that's already probably included in that gross earnings.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So manufacturing cost. So that include all manufacturing, all product cost. that are not direct costs, right? So manufacturing costs are all the product costs that are not direct costs, are not direct material or not direct labor, okay? So manufacturing overhead are assigned to work in process, okay, as the work is done on each unit or bench, okay? So basically, you may assign direct materials, direct labor on an ongoing basis, but you will assign the manufacturing overhead cost as the work is done, okay, on each unit or bench. So again, this is also a clearing account, okay? So when the costs are accumulative, you debit to this account. When the costs are assigned to the work in process inventory, you credit that, okay? At the end of the accounting period, this balance should be 0. Lemmy?
Yes, please, Professor. Could you explain that again? So you said that for manufacturing overhead, it's not ongoing like it is for direct labor and direct materials?
Yeah. So maybe suspend that question because I'm going to give you a better example in the future slides, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
So just suspend that question for now and you will see what I mean by that, okay? In the future slides, yeah. Okay, so when assigning the manufacturing cost to work in process, okay? So here you have the raw materials inventory, you have the manufacturing overhead, and you have the work in process inventory, okay? Direct materials, how should I assign it? From where to where? If I assign direct materials, that's between which two T accounts?
Raw materials. Raw materials and the work in progress.
Raw
inventory?
materials.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you assign direct materials, okay, so you go from the raw materials to the work in progress, right? What about indirect materials?
Manufacturing overhead.
Okay, very good. So you go from raw materials inventory to manufacturing overhead, right? Because these indirect materials are manufacturing overhead, right? And eventually that's gonna go to the work in progress when you assign manufacturing overhead to work in process, right? Okay, and then, oops, sorry. What's the journal entry for this? What's the journal entry for this two assignment?
When it's
inventories?
leaving, go on, please, Isabella.
Isn't it inventory? Sorry.
Yeah. So what's the journal entry? What's the accounting journal entry for these two assignment?
I'm thinking you credit the raw materials inventory and you debit the work in process because that's where it's going to.
Yeah.
And debit the overhead.
Yes, very good. Okay, so for the direct materials, you credit raw materials inventory, you debit the work in process inventory. For the indirect materials, you credit raw materials inventory, you debit manufacturing overhead, right? This account. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes,
Sorry,
thank
can
you.
you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so for direct materials, you debit work in process inventory, credit raw materials, right? That's this arrow. For the indirect materials, you debit the manufacturing overhead, you credit raw materials inventories.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. So somebody has hand up, A, who is A?
Anna.
Anna?
So I just wanted to ask, is work in process account a control account?
A control account?
Yeah.
We'll talk about the control account in the next lecture.
Oh,
For
okay.
now, I want you to focus on the journal entries, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Somebody else wants to ask a question?
Professor, I want to say that in the raw materials inventory, we keep both the direct and indirect materials.
Yes.
And manufacturing overhead also includes indirect material. So what is the purpose of making these two entries?
What's the purpose? So for a company, if they have both direct materials and indirect materials sitting in the raw materials inventory, okay. So depending on the usage of the materials, okay. If it's direct materials, it goes to work in process inventory account. If it's indirect materials, it has to first go to manufacturing overhead.
Okay.
Yeah. Lemmy?
Yes, please, Professor, may I clarify something? So if a company purchases let's say direct materials and indirect materials, so they both will first go on the raw materials inventory. They will first be debited to raw materials inventory.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But sorry, sir. So when you use the direct materials you credit the raw materials and debit work in process. But what happens when you use indirect materials? You first debit manufacturing overhead,
yeah,
and credit raw materials, then now credit manufacturing overhead and debit work in process.
Yeah, because eventually I have to assign the cost accumulative under the manufacturing overhead to work in progress, right?
So essentially, when I have an indirect material, I have 3 entries, not just 2. Is that what it means?
No, you only have this entry when you have raw materials. So
confused.
Yeah, so manufacturing.
Sorry, Professor. I think that what she's trying to ask is that there's going to be another entry after the indirect materials goes into the manufacturing overhead, because you have to convert manufacturing overhead into work in progress. So there is one more step in indirect.
Yeah. Yes,
material.
but that's not what we're talking about. We are right now talking about a materials assignment, right? We are not talking about manufacturing overhead. I will talk about it, but right now we are talking about assignment of the materials, right? We are only focusing right now on the raw materials.
Okay.
But I will talk about this this manufacturing overhead, okay? But for now, I'm talking about when the materials left the inventory, what's the journal entry is like, right? So that's my question. So basically, when you use these raw materials in the production, direct materials should go to the work in progress directly, but the indirect first has to sit in the manufacturing overhead, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. And yes, I'm going to do the direct labor, and I'm also going to do the manufacturing overhead. Yeah. Are you guys okay?
Yep.
I think I'll get it when we get to the examples.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the same idea for the labor, right? You have direct labor, you also have indirect labor, right? So direct labor goes to work in progress inventory, indirect labor go to manufacturing overhead. So your journal entry is for direct labor, you credit the factory labor, debit work in process inventory. For indirect labor, you credit the factory labor, you debit manufacturing overhead, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I get it now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, oops, what happened here? Okay. So now let's talk about the assignment of the manufacturing or cost to work in process. Okay. We are talking about the job cost sheet. Okay. Job cost sheet. So maybe just give me 1 second. So false. I'm going to stop recording. Okay, just stop recording.